Welcome to Chant It Down Radio. ChantItDownRadio.com is the website. This is episode 160, Upper Atmosphere and the Secret Space Program. This is part of the Beyond Earth series, part 16. Today we're going to focus on the Secret Space Program, Black Operations. We're going to talk about the Space Force, the Space Fence. We're going to talk about satellites and looking at the entire hidden world that our taxpayer money funds.
Chant It Down Radio's coming to you live from the Hawaiian Islands, coming from the perspective of complete freedom, coming from wisdom outside the system and then some. This is the mouthpiece of the natural earth forgotten. At this point in time, humanity's been kept from the truth, so Chant It Down Radio offers the coordinates to a path out.
You're searching for something whole, cause what you seek real life. You're watching this world unfold, the truth beneath the lies. Rekindling what's been stole, the need to free one's mind. Uncover the truth exposed, so people see the light. Let's chant it down, so we can know. It's simple, we just break it down a little bit so we can process all. Make the switch to elevate yourself to conscious mode, and it's beneficial we can get this concept rolling. Get the future generations wanna stop the whole thing, but the message demonstrated we can start a post. Taking in, assimilating, getting lots of numbers, waking up the population, try to stop hypnosis.
But to look into this, you want to know about Project Paperclip, and I've talked about it quite a few times on this show. When German Nazi scientists, technicians, and engineers were brought over to America in the late 40s and early 50s after World War II, these people were brilliant minds, and America decided to bring them over. Well, the elite decided to save them and bring them over, more likely. And these Nazi scientists were creating disc-shaped craft, and some say with the help of E.T. And I would say that's why the Germans had such an upper hand in the Industrial Revolution. Not to say that they weren't brilliant in these. There were some great, brilliant minds that were working with the Germans, but where did they get this base knowledge? The Germans observed the vril society, and this starts to go into ancient magic and channeling and other secret societies that some whistleblowers say have been doing space travel to other planets, even in the late 30s. And even though that sounds insane, we have to realize that the world is not what we are told it is. You got to suspend your beliefs and just consider. I don't know if it's the truth or not, but it certainly could be. And with this information, this whole series of shows, we have to really consider that the world we're shown in school and the grown-up world and all that, that is not all there is. And that's one of the flawed beliefs in our culture, is that we haven't caught up to what the world is. And that whole flawed concept, well, we would know about it. I think by now that if you're still listening to the show, and you are a listener of the show, I think by now you realize that the media and the controllers behind them are not telling us the truth. All right? So there is a whole other strand of society that went this direction, with this technology. And maybe we only have some whistleblowers and people like that to go by, but just keep listening to the evidence pile up. So, sorry to rant, but continuing on this, once the Nazi scientists were brought to the United States, they worked on many projects, one which was called the Dinosaur Program, not as in the ancient creatures, but as in DYNA-SOAR, Dinosaur. It was a program to develop a space plane that could be used for a variety of military missions, including aerial reconnaissance, bombing, space rescue, satellite maintenance, and as a space interceptor to sabotage enemy satellites. So we're talking about the weaponization of space way back then. The name that you will know most out of any of this is Werner Von Braun. He was the most famous of these guys, of which made so much possible for the U.S. and space travel. Well, Carol Rosen is a leader and original political architect in the movement to stop anti-satellite weapons and the Strategic Defense Initiative, stopping things like Star Wars, the actual program in the 80s, and spent many years with Werner and became a spokesperson for him, and maybe on the good side of things. I don't really know, but she said this about him. Let me pull this up here. And, you know, I don't know. Let's just take this with a grain of salt. So she said, I met the late Dr. Werner Von Braun in early '74. At the time, Von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played. The game being the effort to weaponize space to control Earth from space and space itself. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again. That was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on as justification for our advanced weapon system was based upon how we identify an enemy. The enemy at first, Von Braun said, to justify space-based weapon system, first was the Russians. First, the Russians are going to be considered the enemy. Then terrorists would be identified. Then we were going to identify third world crazies. The next enemy was asteroids. Against asteroids, we're going to build space-based weapons. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him, he was giving his speeches. Was giving his speeches for him. He would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. So, how credible that is, I don't know. But you think about, what he said about the terrorists. Well, we went through that program, didn't we? He didn't mention anything about the virus, but I can't imagine that he'd be the all-knowing of anything. But this lady, Carol Rosen, she is still alive today. I'm not sure how credible she is, but, I think she's saying something there. And I agree that all of it is a lie. If they're going to, put a staged alien invasion. Invasion's going to be staged. And if anything, these people are working with the aliens, which he did say in another speech that they have had help. But, okay, so just continuing here. So the Nazi scientists worked on many projects, not just NASA. Many of these projects, they were never made public, and when they were obsolete. So, such as the Vandenberg Air Force Base, which had a secret crew of 32 astronauts that closed down in 1986, apparently due to the Challenger blowing up, and they stopped. Well, then that's a whole can of worms itself, some say, because a few of the astronauts are still alive. You can investigate that. That's for a separate show, maybe, because I don't want to open up that too much. But the point is, there was a secret program that had shut down, and it's only after the cancellation of these programs that we still get small info on these kind of things. This snippet of news, I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. This snippet of news about this Vandenberg space program came from the New York Times in the 80s. And of course, a very controlled newspaper. But remember that the 80s is when there was more individualized journalism, and it wasn't this big commercial conglomerate that we have now. So some things maybe slip by the radar. So little articles come up if you are paying attention and know what to look for. So no doubt this Vandenberg program incarnated into something else, or was part of something bigger to begin with, I would more likely say. And just a little side note about Werner Von Braun before we move on. In his book, Project Mars, Braun imagined that human colonists on Mars would be led by a person called Elon. A few years later, someone pulled the original German manuscript out of archives to debunk this myth, only to confirm that von Braun did indeed predict he would be called Elon. Well, maybe Werner von Braun was reading from a script that the elites are following now. I've often said that Elon Musk, people like him, Bill Gates, are frontmen for these dark occult organizations. These aren't heads of anything. They are just people that you are given as a figurehead. And Elon Musk seems like a clone, or something's not quite right about this guy. He seems like a human creation straight out of an underground base. That's just what I get out of looking at him. I don't even know if the guy's fully human. He could be part machine for all I know. But there's something weird about the guy. He's definitely not. He's not your normal guy. That's for sure. So, moving on. So we got these German Nazi scientists that made these programs, and there was a point where the public got the fake version, and then the rest went classified. So the real stuff went behind the scenes. And this is where you get into what some people like Richard Dolan, the researcher, call the Breakaway Civilization. And this also has to do with the MJ-12. The Majestic 12 was a collection of top brass military generals and government officials coalesced under the orders of President Truman to investigate the crash and decide the best course of action to deal with the situation. These UFO crashes, supposedly. The group put together a series of documents on its discoveries as a briefing for the incoming President Eisenhower. These documents supposedly detailed the recovery of the craft, the extraterrestrial entities on board, and photographic evidence of the crashes and stuff like that. So you probably heard of the MJ-12. So they sort of agreed, consensus of UFO researchers, I would say, is that this MJ-12 took these findings and that they have back engineered them ever since. And I'm willing to say that NASA itself is basically one big lie. To what extent, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure their full purpose even. But this Breakaway Civilization is the real secret space program. It's the real program. Probably a combination, really, of ET and humans, and maybe hybrids using ET technology. And I'm going as far as to say negative factions of ET, because only a negative force would keep themselves hidden and work in secret. And are these the same people behind the global elite that are running the planet? I wish I knew, but I would imagine they are working in tandem. And how all this being carried out? Remember that there is so much money that goes somewhere into a hole that we don't know. There's so much. Think about who's funding the chemtrail programs. We are. But this money we don't know, and that's got to cost quite a bit of money. But remember on September 10th of 2001, when Donald Rumsfeld disclosed that his department was unable to account for roughly 2.3 trillion worth of transactions? It's a lot of money. A number you have to think about, a billion. A trillion is a billion billions, and this is more than that. 2.3 trillion worth of transactions, plus this is in 2001. And where else would it go but hidden operations, black ops, upper atmosphere, and probably underground bases? So, interesting how 9/11 happened the very next day, And more interesting really is, if you think about it, the plane that hit the Pentagon happened to hit the accounting department the very next day that money disappeared. So my question, and no answer I will probably ever get, could this be a warring faction of the elites? Maybe the secret space program doesn't always get along with the cabal. Maybe they're two separate forces. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's not all tight-knit like we think it might be, where the New World Order is in unison with this space force up there. But I'm willing to bet that money went to all of the hidden projects that are going on above our heads and way above our heads. Because if you look into what the Pentagon writes, it writes off some ridiculous costs for their budget, like $450 for a hammer, or $640 for a toilet seat, or $7,600 for a coffee pot. I mean, then there's in Afghanistan, there were projects that stood out over the years. One of them that was really like I remember this. It was there was a multi-million-dollar highway to nowhere, and a $43 million gas station in the middle of nowhere that it led to. And come on, do you really? And that was a $25 million project, this highway to nowhere. I mean, can you really believe that? And in the Western world, I mean, Americans get the worst pay and benefits. And maybe it's because the Department of Defense steals our money for these black ops. America is the military might of the world. And where they get all their money is 350 million people paying mass taxes that we don't even get to ever see any of these benefits. I mean, we have more homeless on our streets than ever. America is a mess. That $7,600 coffee pot could be a nice startup for a bum if you didn't waste it on heroin. But my point is here, the global financial market has been rigged to hide the paper trail. You got phony offices and organizations, front organizations, labyrinth-like money trails, so this stuff doesn't get directly caught. And of course, the drug and human trafficking trade, that is huge. The human trafficking and the drug trade is unaccounted money, huge dollars, massive money into those things. So NASA is a lie for sure, and a cover-up due to mass censorship. If you want to listen to this entire podcast, go to any podcast player out there and visit the website chanitdownradio.com, which has many episodes and archives to sift through.